Hello, Anthem fans, and welcome to Freelancer Radio, your home for all things Anthem. This is episode number 7, the Bioware Magic. I'm your host, KJ. Let's check in with the rest of the guys. We got Andrew.
What's up, peoples?
Goose.
Secrets.
Marlon.
Oh, Lord, this guy. Hey, guys, what's up?
And Justin.
I
was waiting for your thing. I thought we lost you for a second, Justin.
Why are you wearing sunglasses? Why?
Oh
it's the middle of the night.
Because the sun is always shining on him. He's so cool. That's why.
Oh my God.
That's also why I'm so dark.
Wow.
You finally went to Coachella, baby.
Oh,
God.
It's the Inland Empire's sun, I promise.
Oh, God. Anyways,
so we've got a few things to get
Good
into
start.
before we get into the meat of this episode. We're really going to hit this topic hard. I mean, obviously, as most people know, Jason Schreier from Kotaku put out an article this week. We are going to have a pretty thorough discussion
A fun one.
this topic. What's that?
A fun one.
A fun, no. Definitely a fun
There's
discussion.
two sides. There's two sides to that article. You could read it twice, like Gustavo, or you can listen to somebody else read it on YouTube, like myself.
So true.
I would love to see how you were in high school. I would love to see how you went about in lessons and stuff like that. How you did it.
You didn't do any work. He had some honey that he was probably doing his homework for him.
Thank you, Aaliyah. I will pay you back
Probably
someday.
has.
I
Name
hope she
drop.
listens to this podcast. She's like, I know that guy.
Name drop.
God,
Oh, my
Lord.
goodness. All right,
So,
so
on
first,
going to Elysium caches.
Yeah.
Cache keys.
Cache keys. We're going to talk about the Elysium cache keys. And, of course, there's, like everything else that seems to happen with this game, there's a slight controversy over these Elysium cache keys. First off, you've got all kinds of crazy items in there that aren't vinyls. There was no armor packs at all, which, I mean, honestly, I went back. I've listened to the Twitch tapes, everything, went through all the old live streams, trying to find the quote from when I had it like burned into my brain that this guy said armor someplace along the way. He did not. Okay. He did not say armor at any time, but
You promised
man,
us
it was
last week.
it was so implied. It was so implied. Oh my gosh. It burns me up a little bit. But I don't know, Justin, you and Andrew, you ran some stuff with me this week. Justin, what did you think about your little vinyl or whatever you got out of your Elysium cache?
So when you and I were running it, we were running on Grandmaster 1. Thank you for running me through that, KJ. Appreciate it. Like usual, the TMSG group, we go in, we kill it every time, carry the whole team. I felt like you and me really carried those two, whoever they were. And then during the mission, I was like, hey, KJ, I thought we were supposed to find these along the way. And you're like, oh, no, they're at the end. And I'm like, oh, I thought we had to look for them. So we finally got to the end. We beat the boss, and they're the chests, they spawn. And he's like, all right, I'll grab one, and then you grab one, and then hopefully these other two dingleberries will open one of the other two chests, or at least both of them. And I'm like, all right, cool. So you open yours, I open mine. And then I'm waiting, and I turn and I'm looking at these guys, and I'm waiting, and they don't open a single chest. And I'm like, wow, they just reaped our benefits, you know?
Yep.
So
which
That was a little upsetting.
Take
But
all berries.
definitely happens from time to time. I mean, I have to say, I did some GM1 runs on the Heart of Rage, which was a suggestion by my best friend Paul Tassi.
nice.
For getting legendaries, and his article out earlier this week. It was fantastic. But best Paul Tassi article I've seen in ever. And so I went ahead and I was doing those runs, and literally I probably have done, I'd say 20 to 30 GM1 runs. And I haven't had a single person other than myself open up an Elysium cache in any one of them. So it's definitely possible, and it kind of sucks when nobody else is helping out with those.
Sounds rough. Sounds very rough.
Might be the fact that I can't get on until 10 o'clock in the evening.
I think that has something to do with it too.
Maybe everybody else opened their Elysium caches later in the day or something. But anyway, the stuff that's coming out of these things, man, I was like, okay, I resigned myself to the fact that we were only going to be getting vinyls and emotes and whatever else. Emotes, I don't even buy them. I'm not into that. But I was like, all right, well, we'll get some cool vinyls. No, we won't. We'll get something that I can make in Photoshop in like 20 minutes, and then you stick it to the forehead of the character and move on. Is pretty much what it's come to for probably about 80% of the vinyls. There are a couple really good ones, so I don't want to fully bash it, but
Still waiting.
it's just was. I don't know.
Demoralizing, I guess, the way.
Andrew, did you get any vinyls when we ran?
Yeah, I actually got 3. So when we ran it, it was you, Joe, myself, and a random. And I had, I guess, a lucky experience where all 4 of us opened the chest. And I got, actually at the end of that mission, my game froze, and I had to restart. But
That happened to me too.
I only got 3 of the 4 rewards. I still don't know what my 4th one was. 3 of
It was
them were
probably
vinyls.
Yeah, it's probably like
And I-
Ranger parts or something silly like
Yeah,
that.
maybe.
Don't make
But
sense.
but yeah, I wasn't very thrilled, I guess, with what I got out of the chest.
Yeah, I've got one that literally is a zombie hand coming out of the ground that is so small that you can barely see it when it's placed on the forehead of my character. It's so ridiculous.
That is demoralizing, to be honest with you. That is
It was-
demoralizing.
I've got another one that literally looks like if you took the rebel symbol from Star Wars and you clipped off the ends of it. And that's literally it. It's just the weirdest looking thing. I don't even get it. I don't know. There's been some that have been okay. I've been trying to be positive about it. I kind of created on our Freelancer radio on our YouTube. I've been creating small videos, taking some of the vinyls, starting to put the ones with the Elysium caches that I've been getting, adding paints and materials to them. And I've been doing like a small series. They're just little clips. They're about 1-minute videos. I've been putting them up on there. So anybody that's interested, like, share, subscribe, check us out on YouTube as well. I'm sure eventually Marlon and Andrew might even do some streaming or something, or post some videos where they're running some missions and things, because those guys can really game.
Here, KJ, I was looking at some of your videos that you made for those, vinyl things. They're clean, and this is coming from a guy that likes, that art direction and stuff like that. Let me tell you, those are clean as can be. I really like them. I really dig them. I'll tell you that. I mean, you did
Very
a
cool.
Thank you.
Very
Wait.
cool. Very
Marlon.
cool.
You're an artist?
something like that,
comment on
Justin.
that.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that.
No comment
Yeah.
on that.
I gotta get some. I gotta get like some kind of art for the I guess the thumbnail for it, the videos, and then I gotta do. Goose told me that I need to learn how to do voiceovers on it, so I'm gonna try to figure that one out. My biggest hit on that is the Boba Fett. Put one up there of how to make your Ranger look like Boba Fett. And in a day, we're up to 100 views on it, which is pretty darn good for a YouTube channel that doesn't really have any subscribers or anything like that to it yet. We really haven't pushed anything having to do with our YouTube at all. I've just been throwing videos up there every once in a while. Mostly
Boba Fett because nobody likes Jango Fett.
Well, I did a Jango Fett. I just haven't posted them yet, man. I've been
Nobody, for some reason, nobody likes the prequel Star Wars. But back to the topic at hand.
All right. So, I mean, anyway, check us out on our YouTube. That's another place that you can find Freelancer. You can talk with us there as well. Leave comments. We definitely will respond. You get 6 of us that all check these things. So somebody will answer you if you talk to us on any of these platforms: YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Somebody will hit you up. Facebook.
Most likely Justin, but knowing him, yeah.
Anyway, one of the next things that we were going to talk to very quickly was the April roadmap. So, Andrew, you want to kind of give us a rundown of what is actually in the April roadmap?
Yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, go through what I can, but a lot of it still hasn't been revealed.
It's a mystery
By Bioware, but I mean,
Literally.
so
Secrets.
So I guess something about expanded progression with the mastery system, maybe higher tier difficulties other than Grandmaster 3.
Great.
There should be some new items, different rewards, I guess.
Can actually get
There's a lot of different free play events that are still locked, so we're not exactly sure what they are. But one I know that is coming is Shaper Surge. The rest of them are still kind of hidden, though, as I mentioned. There should be some new missions for Legendary Missions Phase 2. And then we also get the new Stronghold, the Sunken. Hopefully that changes things up a little bit. And then I guess there's going to be a weekly Stronghold challenge. I'm not sure what the reward for that is going to be yet. And then there's also adding in leaderboards and guilds. So
yeah, I could do without the leaderboards and the guilds and probably a couple of those Cortex things if they just fix the loot situation. To be honest with you, I don't know if anybody else feels the same way.
I feel like it's gonna be, if you ask me for the Stronghold, for the reward for the Stronghold thing, it's gonna be what's the word that I'm looking for? 2 vinyls and some mats. Okay, for our Destiny viewers, they may know what that means. Okay,
2 tokens and a blue.
2 tokens and a blue.
2 tokens and a blue.
2 vinyls and some mats. That's what it's gonna be, man.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I know that one of the things that Jesse, the community manager, had mentioned earlier this week is that Wednesday has come, it's come and gone, and they didn't have the live stream this week, and that was because they're really holding off on the live stream until they can really bring some clear, concrete answers and direction and show off some new stuff to all of us, which I think is a good way of going about it. I don't necessarily need a live stream every other week if it's just a couple of guys fumbling over trying to talk about things that are coming, and then half the time they're not even ready to really speak on some of the stuff. So I'd rather have the clear answers, to be honest with you. and wait another week or whatever it takes. But I don't know. Let's Goose, you ready, bro? Because we're going to deep dive into your sweet spot, brother.
I'm ready.
Game dev. What is it? What's the new game dev genius?
It's called Game Dev Genius Goose, okay? Game Dev Genius Goose. And it's quite possibly the best name that I've ever come up with. It's quite possibly the best, I can tell you.
Is it awesome?
For our listeners out there, so you have to understand what I'm seeing right now. I am seeing Justin with sunglasses in the middle of the night, and I'm seeing with sunglasses in the middle of the night, and they're having a stare down. Do you understand how this is?
I think Justin will win. I don't think I can stare at that mug for far too long. I'll get scared.
But let's bring it back to the topic.
All right,
Please
bring it
enlighten
back.
us with
Bring
your
it
knowledge.
back, boys. All right, let's talk about this thing, Goose. Topic of the week: the Schreier Kotaku article. Ready? Go.
So it's kind of funny because I'll be listening to myself on this week's show, and I'll be like, please don't stutter, please don't stutter, please don't stutter. So yesterday, Kotaku's own Jason Schreier, video game journalist extraordinaire, wrote a huge expose on.
Real quick, before you get into that, what's his background? I don't know if some of the listeners don't know who Jason Schreier is.
So Jason Schreier is a video game journalist that works over at Kotaku. He is known for writing long-form exposés when it comes to the dealings of video games in the industry. He has put out a book called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. He has leaked various
stories.
Various stories with highly detailed information that has come to bear fruit and come to fruition. Most notably is he detailed that Fallout 4 was going to take place in Boston, and he was blacklisted. He's been blacklisted by several publishers. Some of them just won't talk to him at all. Because they don't like that he exposes them. Maybe Bioware and EA will blacklist him now after this story.
I'll tell you this. For Jason Schreier, some people call him the Mole because
they call him his nickname within the industry is literally, I can't say it. Damn.
Trust me, it's a very beautiful nickname.
If you did say it, we'd have to bleep it so you wouldn't hear it anyway. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Some people say that he's akin to a mole. Basically, he infiltrates the industry in ways that we're able to get out the information that us gamers love and enjoy, because no developer out there likes having their dirty laundry aired out. So, but he loves doing that because, hey, listen, gamers spend a lot of their money that they have to earn, very difficult at times, to play these games. And sometimes the developers have, very, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Very weird ways of, making you spend your money in a very nasty way. So the fact that he's doing this for us, it's good for the industry, at least for me.
So he's a reliable source.
Yes,
very much so. He's very, very much so.
He's the man. He knows what time it is when he walks in.
You guys know, but I usually say this on the chat: when Schreier speaks, we listen.
Yeah.
Or read. We read.
No, you don't read. You watch. Okay, you watch videos.
Justin hopes that somebody made a video.
You don't read. So. I'm sorry.
So back to the topic. He wrote an expose, and he titled it "How Bioware Anthems Went Wrong." And I think the way he kicked it off was I don't want to say amazing, but it was pretty telling and indicative of how the entirety of the Anthem's development cycle went. So he explained early on that the game wasn't even supposed to be called Anthem. It was supposed to be called, I believe it's supposed to be called Beyond.
Beyond, yeah.
That hit me hard.
But because Electronic Arts wasn't able to secure the rights to the trademark, they were like, hey, we have to use one of our backup options, and it's going to be Anthem. And everybody in the team was like, well, this rings hollow. This doesn't make any sense. What does Anthem have to do with the game that we're trying to build? And that's really indicative of the entirety of the development of the game So just to put it into context for the listeners, there's two topics that we really want to touch on, and we're going to break down with the help of the article. We're going to touch on, I don't want to say lay blame, but we're going to touch on the failings of EA as a publisher, and the help or the lack of help that they gave BioWare. And then we're going to touch on the failings of BioWare as a developer and some of the issues that they had with the game. One thing that is subtly and not subtly touched on throughout the article, which is something that we're going to tell the listeners right now, we are going to steer clear of. We are not touching this topic, not because we fall one way or another. It's just something that we are not going to touch on right now or today for this episode, and that's unionization in games. Just so listeners know, Jason Schreier is very pro unionization of game developers, and that's fine. That's his prerogative. And he touches on it in subtle ways in the article, and we're gonna make sure to steer clear of that. That's not a debate that we really want to touch on at all for this episode. Having said that, talking about BioWare in particular, one of the things that Jason Schreier touches on his article is how difficult it was for BioWare to get their heads around developing with the Frostbite engine. For those that don't know, the Frostbite engine is an engine created by DICE, the studio over at Sweden, responsible for the Battlefront 2 and most importantly the Battlefield games.
Yeah.
And that engine from the ground up was built with destructible elements in mind, large terrain maps, and first-person shooter gameplay. And that didn't really translate well to the other type of games that EA wanted to build. When Patrick Soderlund came on board, he decided to, I don't want to use the word cut costs, but I'm going to assume that he decided to cut costs and shift all of EA's development studios, Tiburon, the FIFA team, BioWare, DICE, obviously, from using proprietary game engines such as Unreal Engine or others. And they wanted to focus just on using Frostbite as a platform from which they would develop their games. And that proved to be costly for games like Mass Effect Andromeda and for Anthem. Now, this is where I'm going to open the floor for you guys. And I wanted to ask, what do you guys think about the troubles that they had? Go ahead, KJ.
So I see the reasoning behind doing that. If you think about it from a business perspective, right, and it's not just a cost-cutting thing, but if you've got a number of teams all over the place that are working together and they are all working on the same platform, then if the machine is well oiled enough and working the way that it's supposed to be working, and everybody is talking to everybody else about the experiences that they're having and how to do this and how to do that and sharing and, hey, we did it this way, you guys should do it that way. We created an inventory, this system this way, you should use that line of code, carry that over from one studio to the other. If that is happening, awesome system. Great way of going about things. But that's not what was happening here. That wasn't even happening within BioWare. You got 3 teams in BioWare, all in some respects competing against each other, to an effect that, out in us gamers, we've always kind of called them the A, B, and C teams. Well, they actually were doing the same thing on the inside of BioWare, calling them the A, B, and C teams, which they all should have been coordinating, listening, talking. Hey, we did it this way. We had another online game. Here, let me give you some ideas on how to use it. None of that was going on. And not only was it not going on at the lowest levels, like within an internal developer, but it's not going at the even larger levels from developer to developer. I think that's one of the biggest problems with what's going on with the Frostbite system, is that all the people that are using it aren't talking to each other.
That's right.
It's a breakdown of communication.
It's a breakdown in communication on the Discord, and this is going to be a little bit of a long tangent, but if the listeners could just bear with me, when KJ was the first one who brought the article, he brought it to us on the Discord. I remember I skimmed through it and I read it a little bit, and I read about actually KJ quoted a piece of it when it came to Frostbite, and it immediately brought me back to the PlayStation 3 days. I immediately thought of that, and like my mind, it was like the machine was just going forward. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, if you're EA, right, you should have like a crack shot team of engineers whose sole job was to focus on helping the entirety of the other studios within EA become more familiarized with the Frostbite engine. I think, again, bringing back Sony, when they came out with the PS3, the cell was incredibly hard to develop for, right? It was just very difficult for engineers and programmers to get their head around this piece of hardware. What did Sony do? They created the Sony ATG group, which meant the Sony Advanced Technology Group. And their sole job was to create tools to help developers get to grips with the hardware that was sell in PS3, to facilitate and be a buffer and help them develop on that platform. And it only worked for Sony. It worked for Sony because they're like, we need the help of third-party developers and we need our own first-party studios to get to grips with this. How can we do that? How can we facilitate that? And that's something that I believe EA should have done, and they did. They did have a team that was focusing on helping developers within EA get to grips with Frostbite, but they were competing for resources. They were competing for time. Teams like the FIFA team, which makes gazillions of dollars, were prioritized over folks like Anthem. Justin, go ahead.
So, Project Dylan, right? Project Dylan, that's what it was called.
That's what it was called.
Project Dylan, and then Beyond, and then Anthem. When you guys are talking about the Frostbite engine, which I'm really shocked about, like how they were kind of forced to use this Frostbite engine. One thing I do want to mention or bring up, that a success to EA was Apex Legends. And Apex Legends was like a, underground, kind of like nobody knew, no one saw this coming, Apex Legends, but they didn't use the Frostbite engine. I know, Goose, you were telling me that they were using a much more simple engine to run that. And I know it's not even in the same genre of game, but how can a game like that become so successful using that engine, versus Frostbite? I know these guys weren't trained to use Frostbite. They had to go through all the steps, but you wouldn't think that at some point Bioware would have been like, you know what? We got to call the shots. We got to cut our losses here at this point, move from the Frostbite and maybe move to a different engine. I know.
Actually, what we're going to do, I was planning to have like a sort of outline, but we're just going to jump across. We're going to keep it conversational, and we're going to jump across because Justin brings up a great point. He's like, hey, how come this team Respawn, right, when creating Titanfall 2, and now when creating Apex, we're allowed to use a different engine, which is called the Source engine, by the way. Why were they able to use a different engine and not use Frostbite or forced to by EA? It's very simple. It's one word. It's called leadership, right? Respawn has a leader and a CEO in Vince Zampella, who doesn't play around. Right? When Vince Zampella wants something, he gets it. And the reason that he gets it is because his reputation precedes him. The guy delivers. He's never made a bad game. Right? So he carries that reputation with him, and he gets what he wants. And again, jumping back and forth, BioWare didn't have that. Casey Hudson left in 2014 or 2015. Right? They didn't have that. Katie, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what you and I were going back and forth earlier today, right? I mean, that's exactly what I said, is that, we looked at another article, and I'm sorry, Goose, what was the gentleman's name that stepped in as the head guy at BioWare there for a little bit?
Erin Flynn took over after Casey Hudson left. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we saw an article earlier today that we were looking at as well, and Erin Flynn says in the article, it really wasn't EA that mandated us to move to it. And he was talking about Andromeda in the article. But I mean, honestly, when you're pulling a studio that's working on multiple assets, and then you bring them over to one on your main game on this new platform, well, then all of your other stuff is going to start to head in that direction as well. And that's where I kind of think happened here, is that this gets pulled into that Frostbite. Because Andromeda got pulled into Frostbite. And this guy's like, well, it's not EA's fault. Okay, well, all right. Well, then it was your leadership's fault for putting together a game engine that can't do what you needed it to do, and putting it into a game, and then having to make all of your developers run around and build all of these things to work around the system that they're supposed to be working in. It all comes down to leadership.
Yeah, so that's what this whole article was about. It was all about the middle management, or I don't want to say middle. No,
it's not even middle management.
It was just management. It's all about management. Period. Like, they were reporting all these problems. Apparently, they were going into a bunch of these meetings and saying like, "Hey, we have these issues and roadblocks and stuff," and saying, "You know what? Let's just take care of it later." Well, a very reactive kind of attitude to it. So I know Marlon wants to say something.
It's I think in the article, when Jason Schreier stated that when Casey Hudson was in Bioware, they mentioned that he was akin to Jean-Luc Picard, for the Star Trek. There was a vision.
Oh yeah.
There was
a
direction. There's a focus that we're supposed to be doing when it comes to the Mass Effect trilogy. The Dragon Age team, they were more like a meandering pirate team, where basically you're going to port, but at the end you do make it to your final destination. This was nothing like that. This was basically like being akin to being stuck in the desert for 40 years, walking around just doing absolutely nothing for the past, and just going up in circles. And there was nothing in pre-production for this game. Usually it takes for a normal video game for pre-production is about 3 to 4 years, and then the next 2 is where everything comes together and just coalesces and becomes a video game. This was for 5-6 years of just, I don't want to say the word, but they were just sitting around doing absolutely nothing. They were just standing there and changing ideas and just...
It was just a ship with no captain is all it was.
Yeah, it's not that they weren't doing anything, because they certainly doing something. If you look at that art book, they were doing something.
Yeah, they were working. It's not fair to say that they were... It's not fair to say that they were lazy.
But I'm not saying they were lazy. What I'm saying is that if you're building a beautiful ice sculpture in one hand, and your other hand is basically going with a blowtorch and melting it down, that's not working. That's just basically doing nothing. That's just basically building something, rebuilding it, building something, rebuilding it for the next 5-6 years.
But I'll push back on that, because that's what game development is. A lot of game development is. Oh man, I read this. I forgot where I read this, but there was something where I read where it said something along the lines of, "Don't get attached to your babies," right? Where you have to be ready. You have to be ready to tear down the wall and rebuild it again and again and again and again, and however many times it takes for you to make sure that you get it right. And to a large extent, they did that. Again, we're jumping back and forth, but when Patrick Soderlund came in to see what they had, he's like, "This is unacceptable. This is just crap." And then they went back to the drawing board and they cranked out a demo. And when he played it, when he played it for the flying mechanic, like that's what they did. They just reiterated until they got the flying mechanic down pat. And he loved it. He was like, "This is great. This is awesome."
Yeah, but the problem.
But it took them way too long to get there.
That's the thing. That's my problem with this. Is like if you keep doing that, the morale of the people that are doing, they're busting their butts doing this thing for you, at one point they're gonna go, enough. We need to have an idea of what we're doing. We can't just keep doing this thing over and over again. Until for like 5-6 years, and then expect to have something come out of it.
Great.
Yeah, it was in pre-game development for like 4 years, 5 years.
Well, that's that. Wait, sorry, KJ. I apologize. I know you've been waiting, but I want to push back, not just against Justin, but against every other gamer who says that they've been working on this game for 6-7 years. They haven't been working on 6
years.
Right, they were.
If anybody who reads this article will know that in terms of pedal to the metal game development, in terms of building out the game, this game was built out in the last 18 months, right?
Yeah.
Pre-production was all the 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
right?
that's
and,
what it was.
and laying down the foundation. But the actual development of the game did not take 6 years. I mean, the results speak for themselves. Go ahead, KJ.
Exactly.
Well,
You play the game.
what the interesting thing that I thought out of this is like, so we've got this no direction, this whole studio with zero direction going on with this game, right? And it's going. And then somebody puts together this E3 demo, shows it,
2017.
and then everybody's like, oh, that's the game we're building. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting there going, well, okay. So this is the thing, though. That is the vision that I bought into when I went and I spent my money.
That's what we all bought. That's what we all bought.
I know, but what I'm saying is that they finally got a direction.
Yeah.
Right? So somebody had that idea somewhere along the way. I'm sorry. Even if that thing was 100% fabricated, that was not made overnight. It wasn't made overnight.
Not. Oh yeah, no.
There was somebody somewhere knew where this was supposed to go and was able to put it together in a format that actually made sense to be able to produce a demo for the E3 trailer, whether it was faked or not or whatever. Somebody put it together somewhere along the way. There was a direction, just nobody was being told what it was.
But they didn't even know what it was.
That's what I'm saying. They weren't, nobody was taking the information. They had it and they were holding on to it, and they were not giving it out to the masses so that everybody understood what they were working on.
I think that there was a subset, because the article touches on it. There was a subset of developers. I think it was the Bioware Austin outfit. The article explains that they had experience working on online games.
Yeah.
Right? They had worked on the Star Wars MMO, and they had reached out to the Edmonton studio, who, again, in the article comes across as a little bit too sure of itself, a little bit too hard-headed, and a little snooty. And they reached out and say, hey, listen, some of these things that you want to do regarding online aren't going to work. This isn't going to pan out. We can speak from experience. We've worked on the Star Wars MMO, the Old Republic, and they were basically shut down. Right? And that's another thing that I really want to touch on when it comes to BioWare proper. And KJ brought it up earlier, where there was this unfriendly competition between the developers, and what I think the leaders or the management team should have brought up, or should have been mindful of, is, hey, game development is difficult. We're working across different countries, different time zones, different personalities, different people. We should do a better job of trying to integrate these teams together to work in lockstep. And I want to bring in Andrew. I think he's got something to say here. Oh, sorry. I thought you were mentioning.
I was just scratching my head, man.
I think we all been scratching our heads.
Yeah, we've been all scratching our head for the last day. I get it.
Here.
So why am I wearing this Beyond T-shirt that they were gonna?
No, I want a Beyond T-shirt.
No.
I mean, shoot, that's the craziest thing. That before that, it was like what, a week's time that they had Beyond T-shirts made, like it was ready, set to go, and a week before E3, they cannot use the name Beyond. Go with something else. Go with backup plan.
I mean,
Anthem.
Not just only that, but the game that we have now wasn't the game that they had originally. The article mentions how the crux of the game was basically like a survival type game, where the whole gameplay loop was, hey, you're gonna go out in an open world with your friends. Sorry about that. Those are the sirens coming to you from.
What's up, Brooklyn?
the
house.
It is the sirens of the Anthem theme.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
The Anthem of creation. Up in Gustavus.
So the whole gameplay loop was, hey, you're gonna go out with your friends. You're gonna collect. It wasn't even a looter shooter. It was, you're gonna go out with your friends. You're gonna fight monsters in these worlds and these creatures in this vast open world, and you're gonna see how long you can last before you have to go back to camp. That was the gameplay loop, and somewhere along the line, the technology with Frostbite did not allow for them to do that. And the article says that premise just melted away. It changed into something else. Go ahead, Marlon.
It's the way you read the article and the way that you look at the whole situation of Bioware, you feel for these people, because this is not something that they wanted. This is not nobody in game developing wants to get up early in the morning and say, hey, listen, I want this game to fail. I'm like, no, you want it to succeed. And whenever you see other game developers out there, going through the same motions and saying the same mistakes that that you're going through, and then you're like, man, I would love to just listen to what they say and just, hey, listen, maybe we can have an open discussion on how to do the issues that we're having, like Edmonton with Austin. But no, there's, like KJ and Gustavo said, there's always this competition for resources, for time, and for money, that it just feels very unhealthy in a company. When you have people that are having problems with the Frostbite engine, and then the upper management say, hey, listen, we need you to move your people that know how to work with this engine to FIFA. That leaves you shortchanged. That leaves you with the inability of being able to create the tools that you need to be able to fix the problems that you have. When the article states that they couldn't talk about Destiny because everything inside the office is, oh no, you're not making a Destiny clone. But the way that you're talking about in your meetings, and the way you're talking about in the pre-production, it sounds like a Destiny clone. So what are you trying to make with this game? That indecision of not knowing what to actually make, and the fact that we ended up being the beta testers for this game, the fact that they couldn't test in a better environment the problems that they had with the game, like the fact that your loot wasn't going to show up until the end of the mission, that this may not be a good loop when it comes to the gameplay design and the mechanics. The fact that we as players ended up fixing some of the things that should have been fixed from the get-go, that to me is like the most mind-blowing thing, because it shows the pile of issues that this game had coming from the get-go, from before even launching on if you look back at the Anthem PC launch, a lot of the issues that they had was a lot of the issues that the game developers didn't even know that the game had until they actually released it to the market. And
yeah, because they were stating they couldn't even test it.
Yeah.
Their own servers would even run it. They couldn't even run the final game.
It's just like the demo for us.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's
surprise.
VIP demo. demo.
That's one of the things I'm going back to the Destiny reference that kind of really bothered me when I read the article, because I'm a big believer in
Destiny.
I thought about you when I read that, actually.
I'm a big believer in repurposing ideas, right? Because a lot of people, I shouldn't say that when they work, but because a lot of folks, in not just in games development, but just all different types of concentrations in general. Like, why would you want to go through the trouble of starting something from scratch when you don't know if it's proven, you don't know if it works, when you can just borrow an idea and iterate upon it and make it better? And if a developer is coming to you and telling you, hey, listen, there's a lot of correlation, there's a lot of crossover between Destiny and our game, why don't we lean into that and see what they've done correctly and see what they've done incorrectly, and just literally say, hey, you see all those bumps in the roads that they've had? Let's try not to have those bumps in the road, right? But the fact that Bioware was so stubborn to say, we don't, the article mentions, it says, although, what was it? Over the months, Anthem had begun naturally picking up ideas and mechanics from loot shooters like The Division and Destiny. Although even mentioning the word Destiny was taboo at Bioware. Why is it taboo? It speaks to the culture of Bioware as a studio, where they really come across as elitists. And I feel real stupid, and I'll call myself out, because KJ mentioned this a couple episodes back when he was like, hey, listen, these guys just have tunnel vision. They can't see the forest for the trees. And I couldn't see it that way because just my brain doesn't work that way. I don't think
the
like that.
article almost used those same exact words.
Yeah, and I don't think
KJ
that.
wrote it himself.
Like, why would I want to go through the trouble of coming up with a new system or a new gameplay design just so I can say, oh, my team did it, when I can just borrow something from somebody else and make it better? And KJ was right, because I could not process that Bioware would be that pig-headed. But
the management
they were.
at Bioware basically twisted the old idiom, work smarter, not harder, and they flipped it. Work harder, not smarter.
I sort of get where they're coming from, because the studio does have a pedigree but the pedigree isn't loot shooters. The pedigree is
it's
narrative focused
RPGs.
single player game. That's right.
It's not meant
Yeah,
for.
but here's the thing though. Okay, I get that they have not done a looter shooter. Okay, but when I go into any game, I don't care if it's considered a looter shooter or not, right? I'm always on the hunt to upgrade my character. It's part of the natural progression of a game. It doesn't matter whether you're paying a looter shooter or you're getting the freaking fireball from Mario. You're going to want to build up the character. Mario went from little Mario to big Mario when he ate the mushroom, and then he got the flower, and then somewhere along the line they gave him a freaking raccoon tail, and he got a Yoshi and whatever else, right? So there's always a progression. You want your character to progress through the game. So I don't see that as an excuse as, oh, well, we haven't done a looter shooter before. Okay, well, great. Have you played a video game before? Because every single one that I played, I wanted my character to be better at the end of it than they were at the beginning. And I wanted it to be really cool along the way. I wanted to start off with the really crappy armor, and then I wanted to build up and get really cool looking armor at the end. It's the same premise.
Honestly,
this is something that continues on past whatever the finality of the original episode of the game is. It continues on. You're still progressing. I don't know. I'm still not seeing armor sets. I'm still not seeing cool guns.
But I think again, this just speaks to the hubris of maybe in particular Bioware Edmonton, and they were sort of like a doomed crew. I mean, Casey Hudson left. There are other notable developers. There are other notable developers who jumped ship, who weren't probably happy with the way things were going over.
They're having a hemorrhage, bro.
Yeah,
this is we called back in episode 2, I think it was. I think we talked about that back in episode 2.
And that people don't people think of BioWare, but it's not just the name. It's the people that comprise the team, right? And combined, those are decades and decades of experience in game development. And you can always bring in new personnel, and they can be the most talented people in the world, but if you don't get along with them, if the personalities don't mesh well, that's going to be a big problem going forward when creating games, especially when you're crunching and you're spending hours upon hours with these people, more than you would with your own family. Right? Those are things that I think EA should have thought about, and they sort of did. I mean, they sort of did. I want to touch on the initiative that they have, the One BioWare initiative, which just reading from the article, it was a plan designed to get all of the company studios working in tandem. So I can't fault EA too much for that, although they are definitely at fault here. What do you guys have to say?
I'd say it's just a lack of vision from BioWare, or lack of leadership from BioWare's end. I mean, even going back a little bit, just talking about the Frostbite engine, they started using the Frostbite engine on Dragon Age Inquisition, and they luckily pulled it out with some Bioware magic and came out with a good game. But it was the whole development process in that was a nightmare with that. Leadership should have stepped in at that point. Moving forward, we do not use Frostbite for any more games, but yet they continue to use it.
They doubled down.
On Anthem, there's lack of vision. No one stepped up to say, hey, we want flying. This has to stay, or whatever. Every time they took out flying or they put flying back into the game, they had to more than twice. They had to change the landscape and change the terrain and do all this other work for lack of focus on the vision, and they didn't, like I said, they didn't really start focusing on this stuff until too late, pretty much.
And
so just to touch on that real quick, I know what BioWare magic is, but to some of our listeners, BioWare magic was the crunch time. Yeah, if I'm not correct, right? For them, in this case, that BioWare magic was that 18-month crunch time for them to get this Anthem out.
It wasn't necessarily the crunch time itself. It was the fact that they had pulled it out before and made a great game, that the BioWare magic was just going to be, hey, we've got great people, they do great work, and in the end, regardless of where we are right now, everybody's going to come together and they can pull this thing out, no problem. That was supposed to be the secret sauce. That was supposed to be the BioWare magic, was the fact that they knew that they could pull it out. And so, what they were mentioning is, a lot of the old timers were just kind of like, don't worry about it. We'll be able to pull it out. It's not a big deal. We've got that, that's something that make it all come together in the end. But the problem is like you can only do that so many times before it bites you in the butt. If you're the type of person that procrastinates on everything, right? Eventually, some stumbling block that you are not expecting is going to fall in the way, and you're not going to be able to pull it together. And it kind of happened like that with Andromeda, and it carried over into Anthem. And what honestly, what probably happened is the problem probably was just a continuation of Dragon Age, because you had them working on Dragon Age Inquisition, and then you've got everybody just, strung out. So your most valuable resource in any company is your people, right? And so you've got all these people that are just totally strung out from all this rough time they had putting together this Dragon Age Inquisition. They get this huge win out of it, and then BioWare doubles down. And it's supposed to be, now we're going to push out this Andromeda project, right? So then they do that, and that thing that's the beginning of the stumbling block, man. It's like watching somebody running the hurdles, and they hit that first one.
Every single one.
And that first one they hit, and the thing kind of falls down, but now they've got a big old bruise on their leg, and they can't jump over the second one. So they hit the second one, and then that second one just literally just slams to the ground. By the time they get to the third one, they're so beat up that literally they just fall flat on their face.
And they're going full bore too.
I feel like KJ's experienced this in real life before. Like he's talking about it like it's happened to him.
It's
I kind of used to. Well, I never did the hurdles, but I have face planted on a track once or twice before. So.
I have the bruises. I have the bruises to prove this.
I do. I have more than the bruises, my friend.
Honestly, like looking back at this whole thing, and the notion that you think that BioWare magic, this crunch time, this notion that everything will come together at the end and everything will be fine, was sustainable. To me, that's bonkers. No one expects to do the job that you're supposed to be doing in a year, 2 years, 3 years, in 6 months.
18 months.
No, but I'll push back on this for the listeners out there. In the gaming industry, it's not uncommon for games to come together in their final months. I spoke about it before we started the show, but The Last of Us 2 is notoriously known for being one of those games where Q&A and mock reviews were saying this game is trash. This is going to be horrible. This is no fun. We don't know what the gameplay loop is. We're not enjoying ourselves. And in the last 6 to 7 months, that game came together and quickly. And they were able to pull it out, and it's one of the best games of last generation. It won multiple Game of the Year awards. So although we can have a debate on whether that type of development is sustainable, which clearly it isn't, it's not uncommon in the industry, and especially for BioWare, who had the pedigree, right? They could look back, and especially, again, the veterans, like KJ said, they can say, hey, listen, guys, yeah, we've screwed up before, but we've always put out a good game. And the article mentions that Dragon Age Inquisition was one of the worst things because it doubled down and reinforced that negative way of doing things. Andrew, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the last minute crunch time, I get that, but you have to have a foundation to work around.
That's
if
right.
If Anthem started where they are right now, 18 months ago, I almost guaranteed that this game would have been a whole different story, like a complete success story. But none of that was built beforehand. That's the pre-development part that they missed out on Anthem.
Absolutely.
On these other games, they have to have something to build on. That core focus, that the idea of that game, I mean, yeah, you could change things last minute and whatnot, but if there's nothing there, I mean, I guess in Anthem, it is impressive what they've done in the 18 to 12 months, whatever, how long it took them.
Yeah, kudos to you
But
guys.
if that was done prior to the 18 months, in the 18 months, Anthem could be so much more.
I'm not.
I'm saying that's too much procrastination. If you ask
the E3 trailer was real, right? If they had a working product that could do what they said that could be done at E3, this game would have been out of this world amazing.
I feel, man, it's kind of funny because on the Discord, you guys know that I'm the first one that goes for the jugular when it comes to certain things, and now I feel like I'm on the defensive, and trying to shield Bioware a little bit, although that's not my intention at all. But we have to also take into account that, and I'm not excusing them. I am not excusing Bioware, and I want to bring this back to EA because I want to ask you guys a question once I pose it. But they were building a new IP. They were creating a new world. Right, I'm not excusing them. I'm not saying, we know that Bioware lacked leadership. They were hemorrhaging talent. Casey Hudson left. They needed a visionary leader. But my question is, how much of it is EA's fault? Many gamers, many fans give EA a hard time, and they feel like they're this evil overlord who's always meddling and controlling. And it sort of feels like this time around they were anything but. I think this time around they gave Bioware a little bit too much rope and they hung themselves, literally. And
might have been what they were trying to do.
And if again, I don't know about the financials, so I can't speak to that. But EA knows what a good game is, and EA knows what a good game isn't. So the fact that they greenlit this game just to hit their financial deadline was, to me, irresponsible. Sure, they could kick back and say, well, if we would have done that, we would have been irresponsible to our shareholders. I'm like, yeah, but you're being irresponsible to your brand. You're being irresponsible to your developers. You're being irresponsible to your fans. Screw the shareholders, to your customers. Like, why couldn't you say, hey, listen, this is not good. We're going to give you 6 months. We're going to give you a year, right? And our marketing team is going to work their behinds off to put a good excuse out there to let the fans know why we're going to delay this game for a year or for however long. Like, what do you guys think about an idea like that?
Oh, I think it definitely should have happened.
Yeah, I agree.
I stated that last week. I was hot to trot about that last week, man. I mean, I've always been the one who has defended this game, and I still love it to this day. I play every evening. I do. I play every evening. I have a good time with it, and I enjoy the game as it plays. But the problem is that there's so many problems going on. And I mean, honestly, the game mechanics can only carry you so far. It's the reason why I'm still playing is because of the game mechanics. But, I do know that we as a team have talked a little bit about Borderlands coming up, and that's, definitely something that's a thought in the back of my head is, do things eventually move on if these guys can't get stuff together?
There's one thing that I want to bring up, and in literature and life, I'm always a fan of a leader. I'm always a fan of somebody who says, whether right or wrong, right? Independent of whether they're right or they're wrong. Somebody who says, we're going to do it this way. This is how it's going to get done, right? I'm going to lead you. I'm going to take you to the promised land. I have always been a fan of that type of personality.
And talking about me, guys.
Anything but Justin.
Anything but Justin. That's right, brother. And Mark, I got to give a shout out to Mark Dara. And I'm gonna reference another game that was in the doldrums for years, and that was BioShock Infinite. And I'm gonna pat my back a little bit here. I'm gonna bruise myself because I got a lot of bruises this week on my back.
Keep bruising yourself.
Rod Ferguson, who works over at who's the studio head of the Coalition, who's responsible for Gears, he had a pit stop over. he had a pit stop over at 2K Games, at Irrational Games, which was Ken Levine's team. Ken Levine, famous for putting out BioShock, and BioShock Infinite could not find the way to ship. I mean, this game, they just everything was there, but they couldn't put the puzzle together. And Rod Ferguson went in and he said, we got to ship this game. We need to ship this game. Just focus on shipping the game. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And he hit the date. They shipped the game. And when I read the article from Schreier, Mark Darrah was BioWare's Rod Ferguson. Oh, and Rod Ferguson liked my tweet, by the way, when I mentioned that. So that was very cool. But one thing that's very telling, and I didn't even think about this, when you roll credits on the game, when you finish the game, Mark Darrah, the executive producer, is on top of the game director, John Warner. And that is so significant because the article states, when Mark Darrah joined the project in the fall of 2017, he began pushing the Anthem team towards one goal: ship the game. And one of the developers said, the good thing about Mark is that he would just wrangle everybody and make decisions. That is so important. That was one of the key failings of the BioWare teams. No one was able to step up and say, again, because to me, it's not so much about being right or wrong, although that's very important, but it's about making a decision. It's just making a choice and sticking with it too, saying, hey, I did this, we're going to do this, and I'm sticking to it. This is my story, and I'm sticking to it. And he was that guy. He was able to do that. So
you can't dance around things, man. You gotta, I mean, in the heat of battle, right? You gotta make a decision.
That's
and right or wrong, you're gonna have to live with the consequences of that decision. But you know what? You put your head down and you move forward. You gotta continue to move forward, because if you don't, you're gonna be moving backwards.
That's right.
You're going to be. Okay. Stagnant is just as bad as backwards. It really is. At the end of the day, you gotta put your head down and move forward, make decisions. Now, making good decisions, I mean, yes, more power to you. Making good decisions is always the best thing to do, right? But you're not going to always make them. But you have, because nobody's perfect, but you have to keep moving things towards the goal line. And thank God that Mark came in there and did that, because I don't. They may not have hit that ship deadline, or they may not have even, we may not even have anywhere close to the game we have now. I mean, at least foundationally, we have a good game. And I think that's something that's pretty much a consensus among gamers. And I think that's part of why there's such a frustration around this game, is because foundationally it's so damn good.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, oh my gosh, this is such a good game. And this would be so much fun to play if I could only play it, if I could only get online, if I could only get some good loot out of it. This would be so much fun. And I think that's why there is so much just frustration running through the Reddits and the Discords and Twitter and everything else, is that, God, you got people just dying to play your product, but can't. You know,
I want to bring it back a little bit, because I want to nerd out. I just I like it. I love the show.
Nice nerd.
I want to nerd out on the Frostbite engine, and I can't grasp my head around. Now, I'm no game developer. I always preface by saying that, but I can't grasp how BioWare just couldn't decide what game engine to use. Like that is the foundation of your game. Those are the tools that your artists, that your programmers, that your audio guys are going to be using going forward to create your game. And if those tools are in any way compromised, or in any way a barrier to you creating your product, you're not going to create a good product. Mm-hmm. And I know that EA, I don't want to say I know, but we all assume that EA mandated them to use it. But there should have been somebody who said, hey, listen, I understand that we use Frostbite for Dragon Age, and we built off of that. And I understand that we use Frostbite for Mass Effect Andromeda, and we built off of that. But we haven't built off of it enough. Why don't we go back to Unreal Engine? I mean, they created the Dragon Age games, last generation using Unreal. They created the Mass Effect trilogy, which is highly lauded, using the Unreal Engine. And I'm like, why? Like, I mean, they were talking about, there were things that the engine just didn't support off the bat, right? It didn't support a save system, the networking. These are things that that needed to be built from scratch. And I'm just thinking logistically.
This is the
crux,
major points in these type of games.
Yeah.
right? It didn't even have the ability to have a carryover inventory. It's when they were working on it, and it's like, oh my gosh, like that is a foundation of a game like this, right?
And it just leads me to believe that I again always say the same thing, preface by saying I'm not a game developer, but as a developer, I would say, or as somebody in a leadership position making these decisions in particular, I would say the game that we're making decides the game engine that we're going to use.
Thank you.
So I'm of the belief that they just didn't know what they were making. Mm-hmm. That's just it.
And I mean, here's the problem. What it really came down to with this whole thing, like if the game itself, right, at the end of the day, is the pizza, right? They're gonna go make a pizza. What ended up happening is that BioWare had to go build the oven.
Now, not just build the oven, they had to build the house, the infrastructure, the gas lines to make for the oven, okay?
They're like, you got some dude like over in the woods, like chopping wood. You got another guy, he's like, you know, putting clay together so he could build the bricks for the brick oven pizza. You know, you got another guy who's like, you know,
like
hammering
Justin
steel
off in the corner, picking his nose.
Here, the best way.
I mean,
like,
and they're like, we're gonna make a pizza. No, dude, you're making everything to make the pizza. You're not even close to the pizza yet. Like you're still miles away from the pizza.
Corey Barlog, game director for God of War, he said that making God of War was akin to building building a train at the same time that you're building the train tracks.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it's a different analogy, but it's basically the same thing that KJ said.
See, so like I had a side discussion with Gustavo last night actually on the Discord because after listening to the article, I'm sorry.
These were our secrets.
Now he's finally getting it now.
Oh my gosh.
So I texted Gustavo on the side and I'm like, look, man, like this was just a train wreck, this whole Anthem thing. I mean, Beyond or Project Dylan or whatever the hell you want to call it at this point.
Project Bot Dylan.
But I was telling him on a side note on a different game, I'm like, bro, aren't they doing that with Halo, like the next Halo? And I'm like, dude, like if Bioware of all people Struggling just to make this game, isn't Microsoft doing the same thing about the next Halo the next gen Halo? I'm like, dude, this might be a bad game too. Like, why do they insist on making games like this?
No, I'll tell you why. Because they're cutting the middleware. They are trying to cut costs on, hey, listen, we don't have to pay subsidies for a game engine when we can make our own game engine and we don't have to pay anybody else.
But
it doesn't work. It never works.
No, that's not true. I'll push back. That's not true for first party development. And I'm sorry to the listeners. We're going to go on a little bit of a side tangent.
Okay.
But I think it's useful. For first party, like I told Justin, I was like, hey, you shouldn't worry. In fact, I think this is a boon for the Halo franchise, because 343 Industries was smart enough to say, hey, listen, this engine that we currently have is old, right? And over the years we've just iterated upon it, but we haven't necessarily created a new one. So going forward for new gen and current gen, we're gonna make a new engine that's scalable. That works. So they basically did what BioWare didn't.
Should have done.
and we don't know yet because Halo Infinite hasn't come out. But I'm assuming that the reason that they've taken so much time in putting out the sixth Halo Infinite is because they're like, hey, listen, we need to pivot. We need to make sure that going forward we have an engine that works for us and works for our platform. And it's kind of nerdy stuff, but it's different because when you're creating engines for first party games, you are creating an engine for a particular platform, may that be Nintendo Switch, PS4, or Xbox. So you are going to spend the money and spend the time to make PC to make sure
that it works
that it works on that particular hardware. Yeah.
Well, I mean, isn't this one of the rumors that's come out of the rumor mill on Destiny too? Is the same deal? Is that, you know, they're working on a game engine that takes like, at times 24 hours or whatever to get the latest iteration of the game. So even when they were, for a while there, when they were fixing certain things, like it was just taking forever to push out, updates that everybody thought was, small and menial and should have been easily corrected. But because of the game engine that they were working with, they were having similar issues. I could have swore I heard that as being an issue, as a problem with Destiny as well.
Yeah, you're spot on Destiny, and you're also spot on literally on Anthem. I'll read this from the article. So Schreier writes, no matter how many people were involved, one thing about Frostbite would always remain consistent. As it did on Dragon Age Inquisition and Mass Effect Andromeda, it made everything take longer than anyone thought it would.
Yeah.
So one of the developers says, we're trying to make this huge procedural world, but we're constantly fighting Frostbite because that's not what it's designed to do. Things like baking the lighting can take 24 hours. If we're making changes to a level, we have to go through another bake process. It's a very complex process. So what this means is they would literally have to wait a day in order to see the results, to see whether it was even worth it. And if it wasn't worth it, they would have to do another iteration of this. So when you have a game where constantly you need to iterate over and over again to see what works, and you have to literally wait 24 hours for each iteration, that's not conducive to being efficient, and that just drives your morale down. You're like, oh my God, I need to wait 24 hours to see whether this creation, this thing that I spent maybe 2 weeks on, works.
Right? Yeah, but then now take that into the context of the fact that they pulled flying in and out of the game over and over again. I mean, you have to just think about the levels, just think about the world itself, right? Think of what they would have to do with everything that we do in this game currently if there was no flying.
Oh,
I mean, it wouldn't
even interest me. It wouldn't even interest me.
Yeah, but I mean, think about that. Like,
you have to find a way to scale.
Nothing that we do in this game, nothing that we do in this game would be possible if you could not fly.
Well, I think then again they rescaled the maps and redesigned them.
Yeah.
I know, but that's
you were supposed to have more flying in this game.
You're supposed to be able to climb mountains and glide. Now some of the earlier ideas and that got scrapped, and there was more trekking, and then they threw in flying, and yeah, it was like, as I mentioned earlier, and kind of what you guys have been hinting at, it's just poor leadership. No one stuck with their guns on the decision and moved forward with that.
And
I bet you they took out the cover system. That was original.
Oh my! I guarantee this guy with the cover system, Lord, whatever deity is out there, please, whatever universe that I should have been in, please.
He's in Sarah, dude. He's in Sarah right now, thinking about Gears, man.
I can't use resources for their other games, and like
go play Sekiro. Go play Sekiro, Justin. There's a nice cover system there. Okay.
I could believe that they had cover system at one point or another.
Justin, I am your cover system every time we play this game. What are you talking about?
And it's not a Colossus either, so that tells you something.
Like shooting over to dude's shoulder to make sure he doesn't get killed by some low-level scar.
I'll just read this. I'll just read this that I literally just read while you guys were laughing about. But just the indecision on BioWare's part. Check this out. The leadership's team's most recent decision had been to remove flying entirely, but they needed to impress Soderlund, and flying was the only mechanic they built that made Anthem stand out from other games. Just think about that sentence. The one thing that made the game stand out from other games, they had initially decided to remove that. What?
Here, and something that you said earlier today that just made me go, this indecision making, this whole thing of not knowing what you wanted to do, wanted to create, that creates, that lowers the morale to the point where you had people that were in very knowledgeable video games, you had people that were very important to the development of this game taking breaks for months on end because they were just that stressed out, because they just could not get anything to work. If your team is having stress issues, if your team is having issues where their psyche and their ability to be able to work and create a video game is being affected by this, I'm sorry, that's not a good way to go about this. If you're a management for a team and your team is like, yeah, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. What you as a manager can do? There's nothing you can do. You're just basically, your hands are tied behind your back, and you're like, oh well, we're kind of screwed now. It's just reading the whole article and looking back on several things, like the development time, the fact that even until maybe a couple of weeks before the game shipped out, they were thinking about taking it out. I mean, talking about the flying, but there's no amount of Bioware magic that will make future developers that want to go work with you want to come work with you if they realize that how toxic the environment can get at times, And this brings up another point for me, is this is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. I don't care if crunch is a part of video game development. At some point, something's gonna give, and at some point, is just gonna affect you overall. The fact that Apex Legends came and saved EA's butt for this year, for hitting
until this week.
Yeah,
they erased everybody's player data, so that's a problem.
Wait, you're serious?
Ouch.
No, it just happened. It just happened. Yeah, they released an update.
Forget it. No, they're gone. They're deep. EA is in a bad position because people tell me, oh no, they have FIFA, they have all this good games, like they bring them money every single year. Yes, but at some point the gamers are gonna be done with it. At some point they're gonna say, we have had enough of this. We just don't care about this anymore. Because
there's always those guys that are gonna go and buy the next FIFA. They're gonna buy the next whatever.
Yeah, but that's gonna be your
football game. But
every
or
year,
whatever.
it's gonna that community, that percent population of your players is gonna dwindle down over and over again. And it's EA has been having issues with meeting their thresholds and meeting their goals for their shareholders. They've been having these issues for about 2-3 years now. At some point, investors are going to say, hey, listen, your company it's good, it has pedigree, but at some point we just can't invest money on this. We seeing all the backlash that some of your games have come out over the years, the Battlefronts, the Anthems. At some point we don't want to have that kind of toxic atmosphere.
I'm gonna cut in. I'm pretty sure, and I'm gonna cut in, and then I'm gonna whisk us away from this one. But I'm pretty sure that there's that sentiment. But I think at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is. No, it is. I mean, with most shareholders, it is definitely about the bottom line. I mean, they're owners they're part owners of the company. They want the company to succeed in a financial way so that they can get some more money out of it at the end of the day.
And that's not a bad thing. I want to.
No, that's
not a bad thing.
I want to put that front and center. I'm not one of these folks that thinks, these folks are evul. They're
money
hungry.
No,
that's how you make money.
They're just protecting their own investment.
Yeah. So I just want to put that out there for the listeners. I think I could speak for all of us when I say that we're not anti that.
You got average middle income and low income families that put money into a 401k, and I guarantee you that part of some stock segment or something like that in some mutual fund, there is AE shares somewhere in there someplace. Okay, this is not some super group of billionaires
it's
that
not
are
the
all
Fantastic
the
Four,
owners
okay?
of EA stock. It's
right,
not the way things work.
Exactly.
People don't seem to get that nowadays. Okay, everybody that contributes to some kind of 401k retirement plan, I don't care if you make $5 an hour or you're making $100,000 a year or on and above. If you're putting money into the stock market in any way, shape, or form, some form of retirement, something, you have mutual funds, there's a good chance that you have some of these stocks that everybody just
and stuff like that,
talks nasty about or whatever. You may be an owner of EA and you just don't even realize it.
That's
You
right.
need to read your prospectus. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Justin.
What?
Justin. Read your perspective.
I feel like I'm getting talked down to now. What happened?
just real quick. One thing that I wanted to point out, which took me aback, and I think out of all the problems, this one is the one that surprised me the most, was the lack of cohesion within the teams. I'll say this. I'm not gonna name any names, but there's a coworker at work who I don't like. Right? I just for whatever reason I just don't like this person.
Let's name him Marlon.
For whatever reason, no, actually that's incorrect. There are many reasons why I don't like this person, but at the end of the day, I'm very team focused, and when it comes to anything work related, I am always going to help this person. If this person comes to me for anything regarding anything work related, I'm going to help them because their success is my success, and I would assume that this person would feel the same way, and it's vice versa. Right? At the end of the day, we are a team, and I want you to succeed because I don't want anybody else from another department pointing their fingers at us and saying, "Hey, you failed." Right? And that's the thing that took me aback. I'll give this example from the article. So in early 2015, the story changed because they brought a writer, David Gator, from the Dragon Age team over to Anthem, and he changed the story pretty. Like, it was a pretty big change. Yeah, it was a pretty exponential change. His style was more, the article says it was more traditional Bioware. It was big, complicated. It had villains, ancient aliens and artifacts, so on and so forth. And that bothered some of the developers working on the game who were hoping for something a little bit more nuanced, but yet more subtle. And there was a lot of resistance from the team who just didn't want to see a sci-fi Dragon Age, the article states. A second person added, a lot of people were like, why are we telling the same story? Let's do something different. Yeah. And although I get that they wanted to do their own thing, and there's a little bit of pride when you're creative.
That divides the team.
I'm like, hey, listen, this guy's coming in. He's got a proven pedigree. Let's see what he's got, because obviously what we've been working on this far isn't up to par.
Well, it's not just that. They don't even know what it is. Nobody knew what it was at that point. I mean, they literally said it. They didn't know what they were working on until the E3 demo. So, I mean, nobody really knows what the story is. And it's that old Nick Fury type thing, right? You know, you got 9,000 different departments, and they're all working on little. Yeah, everything's compartmentalized, right? Mm-hmm. And then it all comes together at the end. Whoever that puppet master that was compartmentalizing all these different things, right, wasn't giving anybody the full picture along the way. And in some instances, that's a really good thing. It's a really good thing in instances where teams are built to be able to function like that. But when you're doing a video game, when you're doing development in something like this, where there's an actual storyline and things are supposed to move in a certain direction, you can't do that. You can't compartmentalize all these different things, because then it just causes animosity, because nobody knows what they're working on and how they're contributing to an overall goal. And leadership honestly should have got behind that guy and said, this is the direction of the game. This is the story. This is how it's going. And we are moving forward.
I think you mentioned it a little bit. And I think again, the article doesn't touch on this at all. But I think it's sort of, I think that subtly it is tinging, it is dripping with this tinge of politics in the game, within studios, where it's
studio politics.
Yeah,
people positioning is what it is.
Yep. You know? And I kind of brushed KJ off to the side when you mentioned that, but no, he is absolutely right. Like, again, the article doesn't touch on it, but I mean, I see it in my own department at work. I see it between departments at my own job, and it's not just my job. It happens in workplaces all over the world. Exactly, it happens all over, and BioWare was definitely not immune to this.
Yeah, and what was happening is it was studios positioning against other studios within BioWare. You had all three of those guys, and then when the was it Edmonton team that got dissolved?
No, it was the Montreal team.
Montreal team. So when the Montreal team gets dissolved, so what happens there, right? Every time, I've lived a lot of life, right? So I've seen this before. When someone comes in and literally slashes a whole department and is like, okay, that department's gone. You've got all these people that are now scurrying, going, okay, before they get rid of me and I get laid off, I've got to make myself valuable somehow, or they see it coming, right? And so they all of a sudden are starting to position things so that they make themselves look more valuable in some way to the overall team. And I guarantee you, when those guys at Montreal, there was at least some of them that saw that coming, and that they started doing that somewhere along the way. They were positioning.
The article says that Mark Darrath, when he joined the project in the fall of 2017, he basically told the Anthem team, "Listen, we gotta ship this game. We can't be doing all of this over and over."
I said that.
I know.
Goose, game dev genius, said that.
And when they brought back Casey Hudson, I'm going, that's EA and Bioware saying, "Listen, we're in and out of our heads. We gotta get this thing done now." And I'm amazed that they were able to get the game to the state that it is, because it has some wonderful game mechanics that I enjoy. You know, KJ is in love with those things. It just makes you feel like what could have been if they have just had correct decision making and correct leadership right from the get go. The game might have actually been come out in 2016 as opposed to being 2019. You know, it's like, how can you not look at Mass Effect Andromeda, look at the issues that are having, and then go, we'll be fine. That's not gonna happen to us. And then literally 3 years down the line, it happens to you.
It's KJ was right, dude. I didn't buy it, but he's correct. It's tunnel vision, man. They were locked on this
like a horse.
They were just, this is the way it's gonna be, and the Bioware magic is gonna prevail. But one thing I want to. And maybe we'll be winding down here, but I wanted to touch on BioWare's response. And there's two. There's one that I actually want to read, and I'll try to get through it quickly because I want to read the entire thing. And then there's another one that I'm going to kick over to KJ. It's because KJ found that it was Casey Hudson's his tweet. Yeah. But I want to read BioWare's response, and I'll start now. So after the expose by Schreier, Bioware put out a response on their
rebuttal.
Blog, a rebuttal, if you want to take it that way. We'd like to take a moment to address an article published this morning about Bioware and Anthem's development. First and foremost, we wholeheartedly stand behind every current and former member of our team that worked on the game, including leadership. It takes a massive amount of effort, energy, and dedication to make any game, and making Anthem would not have been possible without every single one of their efforts. We chose not to comment or participate in the story because we felt there was an unfair focus on specific team members and leaders who did their absolute best to bring this totally new idea to fans. We didn't want to be part of something that was attempting to bring them down as individuals. We respect them all, and we built this game as a team. We put a great emphasis on our workplace culture in our studios. The health and well-being of our team members is something we take very seriously. We have built a new leadership team over the last couple of years, starting with Casey Hudson as our general manager in 2017, which has helped us make big steps to improve studio culture and our creative focus. We hear the criticisms that were raised by the people in the piece today, and we're looking at that alongside feedback that we receive in our internal team surveys. We put a lot of focus on better planning to avoid crunch time, and it was not a major topic of feedback in our internal post-mortems. Making games, especially new IP, will always be one of the hardest entertainment challenges. We do everything we can to try and make it healthy and stress-free, but we also know that there is always room to improve. As a studio and a team, we accept all criticisms that will come our way for the games we make, especially from our players. The creative process is often difficult. The struggles and challenges of making video games are very real, but the reward of putting something we created into the hands of our players is amazing. People in this industry put so much passion and energy into making something fun. We don't see the value in tearing down one another or one another's work. We don't believe articles that do that are making our industry and craft better. Our full focus is on our players and continuing to make Anthem everything it can be for our community. Thank you to our fans for your support. We do what we do for you. Having read all of that, what do you guys think about this response?
So I already in the very first part there. What was the first? In the first part, it seems like EA was defending them, but
This just to make clear, this is an EA. This is Anthem. Anthem put this out.
Anthem.
Sorry. This is Bioware. Bioware put this out. This is not EA.
So it's like, okay, EA was standing with them though, is what they're mentioning. Like, and EA's with them, but where were they during all this process? That was the first flaw in the very beginning.
I don't know where in everything that I read says that EA was with them. They don't. It doesn't say that at all in this piece.
No, I'm telling you, in the very beginning. Oh, you're gonna make me pull it up on my end. Read the beginning again. The very beginning.
We'd like to take a moment to address an article published this morning about Bioware and Anthem's development. First and foremost, we wholeheartedly stand behind every current and former member of our team. This is Bioware. Right. This is Bioware talking about their team members. This is not EA talking about Bioware.
Yeah, but EA.
This is Bioware. This is Bioware standing by their developers. This is not EA. This is Bioware through and through.
Yeah, that's a whole 100% Bioware response.
This is Bioware. This is nothing to do with EA.
But here's the thing: is that okay? Regardless. Okay, it almost seems like they're talking to just one sole thing here, where it's like, okay, well, we're backing up our management. All right, I get it. You're circling the wagons on your team, but everybody knows that a lot of the management that was the ones that were the top people in place, they're not there anymore. So why? I would have been you know what? Hey, we've already put a plan in place. A lot of the people that were involved in the bad decisions that were made along the way, they're not here anymore. So it's time for us to move on, and we're going to fully support this game. That's the best line I got out of that whole thing, was the very last line, where it's like, that just tells me, hey, we're going to support Anthem. From thank God, because for a while there I was a little worried.
I'll be honest. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but if I think that, again,
you're wrong.
No, I'm not saying that. I just think that, but the Bioware didn't throw the team under the bus, and for me, as somebody who's really big on loyalty, that goes a long way. For them to say, hey, we screwed up, we made a mistake, we're working on it. We brought Casey Hudson back in particular to work on these key issues, which KJ you'll touch on in a couple of minutes. But for them to say, hey, we are going to stand by the people that the article called out in particular, for me, as a fan of the studio and as a fan of people being loyal, that was big for me. Because I'm like, they're not throwing their developers under the bus. And moreover, they're taking a stand and they're saying, I mean, there's another argument to be made on them saying that the article was tearing down people. I don't agree with that at all. I don't think the article was tearing anybody down. It was just giving facts. Yeah. But for Bioware to come out and say, hey, listen, we stand by our team and the people who used to work for us and currently work for us now, that goes a long way with me in particular.
Well, yeah, but I mean, part of that article, I mean, we've already touched on a little bit, but Schreier has his own agendas going on in the way he goes about the article and who he talks to and things like that as well. And I'm not saying
there's an angle he's pushing for sure.
I'm not saying that he's giving bad information, because he's not lying.
No.
Okay. It's not like it's not fake news, right? It's good information that he's giving.
Yeah, his credibility is not. We're not questioning his credibility.
We're not questioning his credibility, but he definitely has his own agendas in the way that he's going about certain things. And okay, so does everybody else, right? You got certain angles that you want to push, and he has his. But Casey Hudson did follow up on that statement. I think because the fact is that it wasn't very well received, and I think that this is a little bit more information and definitely makes me feel a little bit better about everything. Casey Hudson went on to say, and this was 8 p.m. On Wednesday evening, I think some people are seeing our support for our developers named in the article as dismissing the need to continue making improvements in our workplace. Not at all. Part of what interested me about returning to Bioware was the challenge of building a new leadership team around solving precisely these problems. We have more to do, but creating a happy and rewarding work environment remains our top priority. Awesome. That totally speaks to all of the, the workplace is horrible type premise of this thing. Okay. And I do want to note that in that article, I don't remember exactly where, but there is a point at which Schreier says that the in-house surveys on the area to work the best in at one point was Anthem.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm looking for it now.
Right. So he says at one point that was the best team to work on. Everybody was super, super happy at Anthem. And then it became this super stressful environment. Well, when did it become this super stressful environment? It became this super stressful environment after they finally put the pedal to the metal and actually had to develop a game after you twiddled your thumbs for 6 years. Of course, you're having a great work environment if you're sitting there. I'm not saying that they were physically twiddling their thumbs, but they just weren't progressing in any direction.
And the thing is this, though, KJ, is that I kind of understand BioWare's response, because when you read the article and you're talking about the fact that basically when Mark Darrett came back to the team, came to the team, and you have Casey Hudson come back to the team, they basically pushed out director John Warner. So
they didn't push him out. That's not fair to say. They didn't push. He wasn't pushed out. He was very much involved with the game. He took a step back in terms of making decisions.
So the thing is this, like, why did it? Well, when he was on the helm, why did it took so much time for this thing to come out? Why did it had so much issues? Why couldn't they get leaders to say, hey, listen, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this? Was it because he just felt like he was not in charge, even though he was? He felt like there was not, they had no backup from the team members in the direction that the game was going. It's those little things that I feel like BioWare saying, hey, listen, the article is talking bad about our people. And I think that's not what Jason Schreier was going for. I think he was just telling them, listen, this is what happened. This is what, I feel happened after talking to these developers and people inside of BioWare. And I feel like it was a correlation of a lot of things. I feel it was that because nobody stepped up and said, listen, we need to have this game be a shooter looter, or we need to have this game be a first person experience. There was no coalescence of, hey, listen, what do we do? What are we doing? Until that Anthem trailer in E3 where it says, oh, we are making a shooter looter at the end. It's very informative, and I don't think we have had a article like this in a long while for basically the game developing of a team. The only one that I can think of was maybe the
Wrap it up. Wrap it up.
The only thing that I was thinking about was the BioShock, development team. But other than that, I'm enjoying this. Let's leave it at that. This is a story that's gonna go down in the history books as like how not to do video game developing. And even then, you'll still see.
I'm hoping it what this does is this shines a light in the dark places, right? And we need to do that every once in a while to be able to clean house properly. And I think that that's a little bit of what Casey Hudson was, stating there in a very subtle and politically correct way of saying it is, the captain's back in his chair. That's what I wrote on Twitter. I retweeted out his postings and said that exactly. And he's letting everybody know he's back in charge. He's getting ready to bring this thing home. And I'm really happy to see it. I look forward to what BioWare is going to do with Anthem. I'm glad that everything that they have mentioned, everything that they've said, every statement that they have made has been in support of continuing proper development of this game and moving forward. And it seems like everybody is making decisions at this point. From Mark, who stepped in, thank you. And now that Casey's at the helm again, thank you. And we can make some real decisions, move forward, and make the game that has all this potential into something that's real and tangible for the players again.
I was going to say make Anthem great again.
Make Anthem great again, right?
But it's never been great. So make Anthem great for
great.
once.
One time for the one time, Justin.
What? Oh
This guy.
no!
This guy.
No!
God,
no,
you got
no,
cold
no.
now, bro. I'm gonna make
called a-
Anthem
he's like that
playable
kid in class.
again. That's the thing, okay?
One time for the one time.
Never.
Oh my gosh.
God,
So that's all
yeah.
the time we have for today, folks. So let's suit up and hit the high road. Strong alone, stronger together. Freelancers,
Roll out. God damn it. Damn it, you
gosh.
piece of crap.